Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem, Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, Assalamu-alaikum, Jiayanu, Pakhair Agale, Ni Hao, Chunashumme, Washmale, Ohio Gonzaimas, Guten Morgen, Hola, Bonjour, Privyet, Kaifa Hal, Hale Shuma Chatore, Ahlan Wasal, Marhaba, Buna, Mucho Gracias, Swabia, Bhalli Kreaya, Hosh Galdin, Nayo Sayo, Khuyamora, Chivatochi, Hal Yod Kalimera, and a very warm welcome to everybody who's tuned into PTV World and watching World this morning on a blessed Friday morning over in Islamabad. Ladies and gentlemen, the name happens to be Shahzad Hassan Khan, and with me, I'm very lucky to have been joined with somebody who I can rely on, and that too, you know, whenever I have to get any news updates, I think that's the most authentic news which I get from this wonderful, amazing human being who happens to co-host my morning show or our morning show as well. She happens to be Miss Haja Sati. Hello Haja, Assalamu alaikum, subah bakhair, kaisa महसूस कर रही हैं?
Assalamu alaikum, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for introducing me and thank you so much for complimenting me. Thank you so much. It's just an honor. So Shahzad, we were having this conversation before the red light of the camera went on and we were talking about the spending, right? So how did this thought came into your mind? I mean, why specifically talk about spending? Because recently you just came from the UK from having a very lash sort of a trip where you were shopping from Dior and Gucci. And just by the way, we're still waiting our gifts. We were promised that we will get it, I think, last to last Monday, and that Monday never turned up.
You know,
right?
you know how.
So spending.
Okay, I'm sorry. First of all, you know how things are out there. You know, so I think that the transit process of the bag, which is still yet to come from the UK, hasn't really arrived. But once it does, you know, you are definitely in for a treat. But you know, there was this one reason why I actually wanted to talk about spending, and that is that, you know, so everybody has got like different balance to maintain, you know, so everybody will maintain according to their own responsibilities and, you know, the kind of fees they have to pay, the kind of bills they have to pay and whatnot. So the question was that, you know, if you know that you have ample amount of money in your account and you are impulsive, you went somewhere, you went into a mall and you saw something which you think was fantastic, magnificent, and you wanted to buy it.
Yes.
Do you think that, you know, you will think practically and you'll be like, okay, you know, so whatever amount of money I have, I might be able to use it for all of those expenses or probably overheads I have to? Or do you think that you will be impulsive and still buy it and then be like, Allah dekhega yaar, Allah khair karega, something like that.
And then having a very regret of, you know.
And then calling Abbu ji, udhar milega please.
Okay, so I think there are certain things, and I think obviously like you talked about that everyone has different equation when it comes to their needs and wants, right? So people who are married, who have their families, who have their houses to run, obviously their needs and their calculus is totally different as compared to people who do not have families to support, right? But having said, so when it comes to my expenditure, I try to inculcate moderation into my spending, but I am really fond of house decor, home decor. So wherever I go, if I find something that is very new, and especially I love tablescaping, so if I find something that I feel it can fit really nicely into my table, so I do buy it. But having said so, I would recommend it to everyone out there. So please make sure that out of your entire the expenditure, you need to spend some amount of that into the charity, into giving to people out there who are in the dire need, because this is how the circle of zakat or circle of charity giving works, right? The more you spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will never know that how it comes back to you, how it is reimbursed back to you, because obviously the deal is with you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right?
And in addition to that, Haja, there was a reason why I actually asked you that, you know, this is something which we're going to talk about. You know, so there's a certain rule I've made for myself, and I believe that, you know, for all of those people who wake up, dress up, show up and are disciplined in their life will always have a great life.
True,
and that too from Allah Almighty, obviously. That's something which is with Allah. But ladies and gentlemen, I think for people who understand that, okay, you know, that these are their responsibilities, so rather than spending impulsively, I think that they should really save. You know, make sure that first of all of those overheads are paid, and then whatever is left behind, you save some and then you spend some as well.
Of course.
I think for everybody to be out there, I think what we really need to understand is that if there's something which is essential for your well-being, please make sure that you never stay back from spending onto that. For example, people will have a lot of amount of money, all of a sudden they would think of making their own house, but they would compromise on their food. So imagine that the same gentleman who was compromising on his food just because he wanted to build a house, unfortunately is not alive 2 years after he has built an own house because of the fact that he didn't really look after his or her nutrition. So I think what people really need to do is prioritize. I think health comes first. You know, this body This is a home too as well, so please make sure that you look after it, and where it is essential to invest for your well-being, please make sure that you do invest. Do not stay back, do not apprehend yourself from spending on that, because it will give you good quality of life. And please make sure once you'll get good quality of life, only then you can achieve a lot of other goals as well. Alhamdulillah. Do you think, are you going to agree to it?
I think that making house is very important, especially in the times of global inflation.
No, but I wasn't saying it to you. And where we talk, where we actually
I
spoke.
didn't take it. No, I didn't take it
we spoke,
personally,
now people would know, alhamdulillah. But where we actually were talking about, or Hajat reminded us about tablescaping as well, just a few days ago, he hosted a lavish dinner, and the dishes were fantastic as well, and the pupos were over, or the khalas were over.
Khalas.
I think it was wonderful, and it felt like as if, when somebody posts about food on internet, it looks like as if it's an awami dawat, so you can probably watch and just feel, okay, yaar, korma maze ka ho gaya, something of that sort.
So I invited you, even I think few days ago.
Now you have always been really kind,
yes,
alhamdulillah.
Yes, alhamdulillah. So we will start the show with our top stories, which is about the Supreme Court has directed Imran Khan to approach Islamabad High Court after he appeared in the Apex Court on its orders. The court ordered the authorities concerned to keep PTI chief in the police lines guest house. 3-member Supreme Court bench headed by Chief Justice Umar Ata Bandial heard the plea against the arrest of Imran Khan. And we hope and we wish that we see the more finer days ahead, and especially we feel that our leadership, the top leadership, especially when it comes to the government and the entire state authorities, we are in the best of hands.
That's true, and we do feel it like that. But I'm as an ordinary Pakistani, I'm in a state of confusion, and there's a reason. So Islamabad High Court says something, and they say that the arrest was legal, and everything was fine, and then all of a sudden you go to Supreme Court, and the Chief Justice of Supreme Court obviously says that it wasn't legal, or as per the law. I mean, so as an ordinary Pakistani, I'm just confused, and I do know that obviously Supreme Court is the mightiest authority over here, so we obviously really need to kind of rest our case with Supreme Court. But let's see what's going to happen today with the Islamabad High Court as well. But ladies and gentlemen, I think whatever happens, it should actually be all by the law. I think that's the case. But moving on, ladies and gentlemen, where the transmission of Radio Pakistan Peshawar has been restored, alhamdulillah, after the building was burned down by violent protesters on 9th of May, which we have mentioned quite a lot of times, me and Haja over here, that we condemn such actions, such vandalism, hooliganism. This is not allowed, and I think that this is something which we really need to raise more awareness about. But as per details, the armed forces have played an important role in resuming the broadcast of Radio Pakistan Peshawar. Pakistan Army fixed the electricity and provided more than 100 personnel to clean the Radio Pakistan buildings. Pakistan Army also provided transportation and repaired the damaged areas. Thank you so much, Pakistan Army.
That's very true, and obviously we always condemn all of this public hooliganism and vandalism, and damaging public property is never acceptable, because obviously you are damaging the public property. It's used by the public, it is not used by the elite. So you need to direct your anger towards more productive thing, not just in a more destructive way. So moving on, Pakistan's domination on the ICC ODI batting rankings further strengthened after left-handed opener Imam ul Haq moved a spot up to claim 4th spot. As per the latest update, the left-handed opener turned out to be a consistent contributor for his side in the home ODI series against New Zealand, as he had 2 half-centuries and a match-winning 90 in the 3rd fixture of 5-match series. Imam ul Haq accumulated 174 runs in the 3 matches he played during the series at a healthy average of 58.
Exactly, and for Imam ul Haq, I think that that the sort of a player he is, he can actually do wonders, and 174 is certainly something which he himself might not be satisfied with. I mean, I was looking forward to for the number of matches he was given or he was provided. I think I was looking forward to centuries in every match as well. I mean, 3 one-day international centuries. Likewise, I believe Fakhar Zaman did really play very well, and then Babar Azam, ladies and gentlemen, obviously wins our hearts as well. But moving on, where, ladies and gentlemen, whenever we are to speak about diplomacy, I think it totally depends on their office in the relevant country, and how the people over here within the embassy are going to deal with the government of the country as well. So I think it's a good news where the Ethiopian opened its embassy in Islamabad as both sides expressed desire to further their bilateral ties in various fields, followed by several visits by Pakistan's business delegations to Ethiopia and Ethiopians coming to Pakistan. The opening of the embassy underlines the importance of Africa in Pakistan's diplomacy. Very true. Addressing on the occasion, State Minister for Foreign Affairs Hina Rabbani said Pakistan and Ethiopia face similar economic challenges and commonality of resilience of people of both countries. Ethiopia State Minister for Foreign Affairs Smis Ganu Arga announced opening of direct flights from Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa to Karachi in an attempt to strengthen trade ties. Ethiopian ambassador to Pakistan Jamal Bakar Abdullah termed the opening of the embassy in Islamabad event as an African nation undertakes downsizing of its overseas missions, a huge step towards strengthening ties between Islamabad and Addis Ababa. And to be very honest, the Ethiopian ambassador, Mr. Jamal Bakar Abdullah, was actually over here on our show as well, brought us some wonderful coffee packs as well, which we are missing out on. And Ethiopian coffee, ladies and gentlemen, happens to be one of the finest and the best in the world. And this was something which was stated to us by the Honorable Ambassador to Pakistan, Mr. Jamal Bakar Abdullah. And we would certainly want to have him. He was on television just now, speaking and addressing to the attendees of the event. It's wonderful to see how, we are moving one step ahead every single day when we speak about soft diplomacy.
That's true. And Shahzad, today is Friday. It's 12th of May 2023 and it is the International Nurses Day. So we know that we celebrate or observe this day after the birth anniversary or rather the anniversary of the Florence Nightingale's birth, right? And we know that the nurses is a profession that is dominated by the women. Why? Because biologically women are the caregivers. They have their softer side, they have softer side, they can empathize more. But obviously in Pakistan we see that it's a very underrepresented profession, I would say, right? So everyone is willing to go to the medical schools to graduate and become doctors, and there's so many saturation, I would say, of the doctors out there. But I think when it comes to the profession of nurses, it is the other way around, right? And obviously this is the profession, especially when it comes to the caregivers or the caregiving. So certainly the first thing that comes into your mind is, the shafqat of your ammi, or maybe how the mothers treat you in that sense, right? So we also associate the same profession, same shafqat or same caregiving with the nurses, but obviously they face a lot of problems, and we are here to observe, talk about it, pay tribute to it, because during the COVID-19 pandemic we have seen that how they were the unsung heroes. They were always out on the front. They're always looking after the people, especially in the dire circumstances, considering the fact that their own health was at the risk, right? At the detriment of their health, they were doing that. So we need to give tribute to them because they obviously are unsung heroes.
Exactly. And Haja, in addition to that, I believe that we really need to address, on this day, the challenges they come across. So imagine that there's a shortage of nurses all over the world. I'm not even labeling it to Pakistan. So just if I have to speak about Balochistan only, so imagine that they only have 900 nurses and they need almost 20,000 to look after the people. And this is exactly how it was in England. Doctors were protesting over there. They still knew that there is a shortfall of nurses and midwives over there as well. So you go around. And it is certainly because of the fact that I think that we have been very judgmental in today's time, because back in those days, do you remember where the concept was only of midwives? There were no nurses, so initially it was midwives, and then there were nurses as well, and there were schools which were opening up, and then people started sending their daughters and then obviously their sons to kind of go and train themselves. Where I said that, that people are more judgmental, so imagine that all of a sudden if I'm going to introduce to you myself, Dr. Shahzad Ehsan, for example, you'll be like, okay, Dr. Saab, aiye baithiye. Imagine that if I come in and I'll be like, I'm the nurse, you might not treat me right. And that's exactly what I wanted to address today. And it's because of the fact that we really need to respect people the way we respect anybody, So may it be the, Honorable Ambassador, or may it be anybody else. I think for me, it is to introduce or then at the same time welcome people, at the same page, make sure that I give them that same level of respect across all forums. And it should not really matter which background you come from. And even if you come from such noble background of nursing, I think, ladies and gentlemen, the respects really need to be higher, because the doctor is going to come in. He will make sure that he instructs the nurse that, okay, that this sort of medication needs to be administered to this patient. And it's the nurse who looks after day in, day out, make sure when her shift is changing, the other nurse who's actually coming in, she's more aware of it as well. So which is why the theme, our nurses, our future. Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about this, we're certainly very lucky that we've been joined by two amazing nurses over here whom we're going to respect and kind of give them the credit for their services. But first, we really need to head out towards a short break. After the break, we will be in conversation with them. Let's see whether this profession actually gives them goosebumps, or do you think that they're certainly thinking about changing their profession? I think that's what we'll be talking about and focusing on after a short break. Good morning.
Welcome back. So we were talking about the World Nurse Day, and we want to pay tribute to all the nurses out there, and obviously we have two wonderful nurses in the studio. So without any further ado, we would like to introduce them. We are very glad that we have been joined by Sana Babar. She happens to be the head nurse peds at the ICU. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thank you.
Right. Joining Sana is Rais Khalid. He also happens to be the head nurse oncology. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
So it's wonderful to have you both over here. But first things first, a female nurse is obviously a nurse, and that's what we refer to. But what do we refer to as a male nurse? Because, for example, if we are flying in an airplane, then there's air hostess and then there's a steward, right? So there's always a difference with the gender. So is it the same, with nurses as well, or across all genders? We are to kind of, label you a nurse, or do you think that we have another word for that?
No, actually, nurse is always a nurse.
Okay.
It doesn't
Either a
matter,
male
it's
or a female.
yeah,
Female.
Doesn't make a difference.
It doesn't make
So
a
thank you so
difference.
much, nurses, for joining us. Wonderful to have you. Today is your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right. So why is it important to observe this day? And obviously, when we talked about in the introduction, so nurses is a profession. When we talk about the caregiving, it is associated with that, right? So someone who is looking after the patients, and obviously, it is also a thing which is very much encouraged in our religion, in all the religions, I guess so, right? Looking after the people, taking care of the people, giving them love and warmth to them, especially when they're in a vulnerable condition or they're not feeling well, right? So why do you think we need to observe this day, and what is your everyday routine, especially as a nurse in your ward? Go ahead, Sana.
As a nurse, it's our responsibility to make love and a communication with the patient. Definitely, we have a communication and a contact with the patient 24/7. Doctors are just come for a second, for a minute, and just write the prescriptions and all that. After that, we should have to provide the care to the patient, right? First of all, we should have to build the trust to the patient, right? They should have to trust us, and then when we follow all the medications, we should have to stay limitations, and we provide medications and we provide health care to the patients.
I think it's wonderful, and that's obviously the sole obligation of your profession, where you are certainly over there to provide care to the people, and it's wonderful. But I'm going to move on to you, sir, as well. And what I would want to ask you is that today is a day where we celebrate nurses all across the globe.
Yes.
And we are to highlight the kind of sacrifice they gave, the kind of challenges they come across as well, and which is why we're saying that our nurses are our future. And indeed, you are our heroes. Our heroes as well. How would you highlight this day? Do you think that such a day really needs to be celebrated and observed all across the globe to make sure that we kind of give back to the people who have been looking after the community and the society?
Exactly. This day needs to be celebrated, because I don't think so. Okay, it's a bad thing that if I say that nursing is a very underrated department in our nation. We never even accepted as a nurse is a care provider.
True.
It's not a just profession to earn money or do something. It's actually we connect with the patient like with all our souls.
Okay.
We care to the patient, and today we are celebrating definitely International Nurses Day. So it would be great कि इस चीज़ को recognize करना चाहिए.
True.
Our services, our compromises, our sacrifices. So I think it should be celebrated.
And that's exactly why we gather over here, which is why if I am to ask you, what contributions do you think that the nurses might have made to the society? So what would you say, KR? This is what we have done, the well-being of the society, lesser pressure on the health sector, making sure that we're going to be there every single day, people who cannot move, people who cannot help themselves, people who are ill.
Yes.
So how do you think that nurses have made contribution towards the community and the society?
Actually, if I'm talking about only the main thing of profession of nursing, so इसमें ये होता है basically कि जो nurse होते हैं he came while he's getting early in the morning, and even though while he get up or she get up, so in his or her mind,
Yep.
she thinks that we are going to on duty and we are taking over the patient, we are taking the over from the other staff, and what we will do, they already make the plan
True.
with their whole shift. So it's I think so okay.
Yeah, it's
I
all right.
don't
It's
have
all right.
I don't have much more words
It's
about
perfectly all right. You can explain it in Urdu as well, and we'll translate it for our audience as well.
मीन्स अगर आप सुबह उठते हो एंड देन यू कैन गो फॉर अ ड्यूटी, और आपके जब ओवर अप लेते हो उसमें मेन कंट्रीब्यूशन जो है वो एक नर्स का इस सूरत में होता है कि डॉक्टर इज केम ओनली फॉर अ टाइम बीइंग, ही केम चेक राइट द प्रिस्क्रिप्शन एज सना सेड एंड देन ही और शी गो देन
Exactly.
आफ्टरवर्ड जब जो नर्स होती है इज़ अ मेन केयर प्रोवाइडर, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द पेशेंट केयर. सो आई थिंक सो दैट पेशेंट केयर हैपन हो ही नहीं सकती नर्सिस के बगैर.
Exactly, and that's certainly the area where
That's
obviously nurses have contributed. And Hajar, I think that he's very rightfully mentioned that, you know, obviously the doctor is going to come in, he's going to
course.
listen to the patient,
Take around,
and then
yes.
obviously the entire history of what the patient was doing the entire day. The next day, the doctor is going to ask the nurse,
Yes.
and the nurse really needs to be on point with that. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that it's a blessing in disguise which we get at hospitals.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we are unable to recognize it. You know, I think there's a problem in
That's
us.
true. That's
And we certainly need to address it. We really need to value them.
Yes.
Because what I wanted to mention over here, Hajar, was,
Sure, sure.
so imagine that one of my mommy who happens to live in US, you know,
Okay.
and she's a nurse.
Okay.
She gets paid really well. You know,
Right.
so
Yes, of
one of my
course.
cousin in England, she's a nurse. You know, she gets paid really well over
Wonderful.
here. And I think that's exactly what I would want to ask them, whether, you know, if we are to value them, we certainly need to make sure that, you know, they have a
That's
great
really-
livelihood. So do you think that the salaries which are being given to the nurses are actually you're happy with it, or do you think that there needs to be an increase in it, or do you think that, you know, people can actually do wonders if there'll be a slight increase within their salaries?
Sorry to say, but the money is the basic need of the
पैसा
life.
तो मेरा ही मसला है.
Money is the basic need of life. Definitely, the effort of nurses can't be rewarded.
Alhamdulillah.
But I guess there must be payback. उनकी एफर्ट्स को पे बैक वैसे नहीं मिलता है पाकिस्तान में जैसे मिलना चाहिए.
Yeah.
दिन रात अगर वो अपनी फैमिलीज को सेक्रीफाइस करके, अपनी पर्सनल लाइफ को सेक्रीफाइस करके, अपने बच्चों को, हस्बैंड्स को, एवरीथिंग, तो वो अगर अपनी लाइफ को सेक्रीफाइस करी तो डू यू थिंक कि उनको वैसा फीडबैक मिल रहा है? आई डोंट थिंक सो.
Yeah, I think the profession of medical in general is very underpaid, Shahzad. So if you look at the wages of even of the doctors, right? So the starting pays is somewhat around 30,000, 25,000, 27,000, which is nothing, which is
Obviously,
peanuts.
when they're
Obviously.
25, 26 years old, but imagine, you know, it's a gradual graph. So imagine that, you know, if you're going to
Yeah,
get
but then
into
you
surgery.
have to invest a lot, struggle a lot. So it's not that like you graduate, for example,
Obviously,
if someone from
I used
as
to
a
I used to
marketing
do
student-
shows for free. You know, I was never getting paid. You know, when I started my own
Yes,
career.
yes, but that is not how it should be, right? You should not exploit the talent out there. And Shahzad, do you remember, especially when the COVID struck across the world, around the globe, we have seen that how many people were struggling, and the doctors and the nurses had to make this very terrible choice of which patient to give that, what do you call that, the oxygen. The thing, the oxygen meter to,
Ventilator.
right? Yes, ventilator, thank you. And that's a very terrible choice considering the fact that people were, I mean, they were struggling with the oxygen mask, they don't know how to do that. And obviously, at that moment, especially the kind of risk that is there when it comes to the COVID. So did it occur to you for, you know, maybe some time that you should resign from this profession because there's so much danger out there? Because I remember in the initial days of the COVID, there was a lot of fear, right? The information that was coming from around the world was so dangerous, and it was so, I mean, grueling to take in, that it might have occurred to
It's
you.
like
Maybe
going to war every single day, not knowing whether you're going to
Exactly.
come back safe or
and
not.
that too with a very invisible enemy which your eyes cannot even detect. So you might be that your parents have asked, you know, don't go there, beta, because we really don't know if you're going to come back alive or not. So did that ever occur to you? So
Yeah, I'm going to share my personal experience.
Sure,
My
sure.
mother asked me that left this profession.
Yeah.
Okay, your life is more important than this. But I told my mother that when I indulge in this profession, I take an oath that to serve humanity. So this is my first priority, to take care of my patient, and that's all.
Wow, it's wonderful, and you know, I think within some households, I think parents did it on purpose. बेटे या तो नौकरी छोड़ दे या घर आना छोड़ दे.
Exactly.
Something of that sort, because I think as a as a child, me myself, if I was working somewhere outside, I always had to make sure that that my parents are safe, and I think
course.
that's something which is of utmost importance to anyone. But while we speak of it, I think, Haja, what we really need to address is that having more nursing schools. I think that's something which is very important, and I think only then we'll have that sort of professionalism even within or amongst the nurses as well. Because, sir, I mean, now we are to speak about nursing schools. So, you might have attended one, she might have attended one as well. Do you think that the quality of nursing schools over here matches the international standard of nursing schools as well, or do you think that it can get better?
I don't think so that it's matched to international setups, because हमारी मैनेजमेंट को इस चीज़ पे फोकस करना चाहिए कि जो इंटरनेशनल मैच के साथ हमारी नर्सिंग जा रही है, अगर हम लोग बाहर जाते हैं देन वी हैव टू प्रिपेयर फॉर आवर माइंडसेट कि यहाँ की नर्सिंग में और वहाँ की नर्सिंग में डिफरेंस है. सो अगर हम इन पे ध्यान दें, अगर हमारी मैनेजमेंट हो या स्कूल्स को बिल्ड किया जाए गवर्नमेंट लेवल पे या सेक्टर्स पे आके किया जाए, बिकॉज द कंडीशन ऑफ even all over the Pakistan, if we see that the hospital, even hospital, obviously hospital के साथ जो है वो स्कूल लिंक्ड होते हैं, और अगर उनके साथ होते हैं तो वो उस तरीके से मैनेज नहीं कर पाते. बट नाउअडेज ये प्रोफेशन काफ़ी ज़्यादा बड़ा है, इस पर फोकस किया गया है. हम इवन दो इन डेज में डिग्री से स्टार्ट हो रहा है, हम जेनेरिक कर रहे हैं, जेनेरिक के साथ MSN है, PhD तक जा रहा है. और आजकल की जो नर्सिस आ रही हैं, जो आजकल जो नर्सिस हम जॉब पे हैं और जो हम अभी अपनी प्रोफेशनल लाइफ में कंटिन्यू कर रहे हैं, तो दे आर वेरी नॉलेजेबल. और ये सिर्फ उन प्राइवेट स्कूल्स की वजह से हुआ है, जो कि प्राइवेट स्कूल्स हैं, गवर्नमेंट सेटअप ने भी काफ़ी ज़्यादा ध्यान दिया है.
Wonderful, and I guess it's wonderful. So I'm going to translate it for our English-speaking audiences as well. And Mr. Rais, what he has to say is that obviously, we are certainly not close to matching the standard, of the West of nursing as well. And I believe obviously a nation is going to take a time, and that. But the best part is that we are talking about it today. And, if we are going to continue to talk about, on 12th May probably, it's a ripple effect, it's going to come back, those ripples which we will create, ladies and gentlemen, eventually things will start to change. And it is for the policy makers now, Haja, and this is a question for you. Now, imagine that, because, this is how it seems like, and this is how it might have been, that imagine within the health ministry, do you think that the policy makers might have thought about that, okay, we really need to kind of focus on the quality of the nurses that we are producing thanks to private schools? That's wonderful.
Yes.
But that's not where the health ministry is going to focus on primarily. Health
Yes,
ministry
of
will
course.
certainly focus on the institutes they already have.
Right.
Do you think that, there is this priority of having a better quality of schools so that, that the graduates we are producing would
Yes.
know the international techniques of how to kind of look after an ill person?
Yeah, I think that is the question that should be best answered by the health ministry. But having said so, I do feel that there is this mafia out there, especially when it comes to private sector, because they are taking so much money. I mean, obviously the machinery and the medicine, everything is expensive considering the fact that there is global inflation out there. But I don't think so they're investing enough on their human resources, right? So when I talked about the doctors, their pay, so my cousins are doctors and they were always complaining about how they are underpaid, and especially they are female, so they do not have to run their houses. But consider, so just imagine the plight of a male doctors who have to run their houses, that too on the same money, because they are investing a lot, especially when it comes to the the self-paid education of the medical is extremely expensive, right? And I think the return that is coming on, it's not that worthy. And obviously when doctors are underpaid, so what to talk about the nurses in the first place? And also, Shahzad, we need to talk about some of the cultural norms here present in the country, right? So we see that there are a lot of patients who misbehave with the doctors, with the paramedical staff, with the nurses, and obviously in general we need to inculcate more tolerance and patience into our the ethics, work ethics, into our interactions. So did it ever happen, Sana, that a patient was angry or was impatient, or maybe the family members were not patient? So how do you deal with them? Because obviously you are in this profession, and I'm pretty sure if 100 people are walking in, at least 5 people would be very angry about it.
Especially when there's a shortage of nurses, so in one ward you only have 2 or 3 nurses, and you have 50 patients.
Plenty of patients,
so it really
yes.
gets difficult, right?
Yeah.
How do you handle them?
As a critical unit nurse, definitely it's a painful situation when we told the attendants that your father is no more, your mother is no more, your child is no more. They got panic.
Yeah,
There's the emotional
Obviously,
changes, right?
trauma, yeah.
At that time, we should have to be patient, understand their situation. But if they are looking to us that we are dealing 5 patients, then उनको भी तो थोड़ा सा इस चीज़ को realize करना चाहिए, right?
Exactly, and there's one more thing, Haja, which I've observed, and sir, I would want you to kind of agree or disagree to this as well. Now, so imagine what happens is that, for example, if you know you're in a hospital and your patient, you know, he or she is suffering from an illness, you know, so the nurses and the doctors are very well aware of their condition. But what happens is that the family of that patient will certainly be more eager to, you know, to make sure that the patient is being attended by the doctor or by the nurse at all times. You know, so they certainly do not know whether the illness or the disease, you know, the potency of the disease as well. So, you know, they'll just panic. They'll be like, all right, you know, the oxygen saturation is going down, call somebody, you know, because we are unaware, you know, we certainly have no idea. And the nurses, so you run to the nurse, you're like, all right, the oxygen saturation is dropping down. Sir, you just have to fix the mask. So imagine, you know, this is how the problem does occur. But while we are speaking of it on a lighter note on International Nurses Day as well, you know, since you closer to my question, because Sana, you the head nurse at Peds as well. So back in those days when we were kids, we used to watch a lot of movies, right? So when we used to watch a lot of movies, I still remember this movie where the nurse would change a baby of one parent to another, and you know, things like that, or probably, you know, the baby won't be there, you know, within the hospital. So do you think that these practices ever existed, that a nurse would change somebody's baby with somebody else's baby? Do you think, did that ever happen?
Yeah, before some time, due to less education and all that.
बाजी आप ऐसा करें, वो बच्चा हमें दे दें, ये बच्चा उनको दे दें.
No, not like that, not like that.
You know, because you know, if movies are trying to depict such a picture, I think it might have taken place. It's not I'm not saying that it might have taken place over here, but it might have taken place somewhere in the world, right? That's something we
But
can say.
not
Right?
in Pakistan.
Not
I
in
think so.
Pakistan, yeah.
These
Obviously
practices-
not in Pakistan. I mean, that's not what I'm saying. But I was only asking this question because I keep on watching these movies. Even recently, I watched the movie. Even recently, I watched this movie. Okay, I'll tell you.
What is the name of the movie?
Okay, I'm not going to. I cannot share that. But just very recently, you know, I watched this movie where on this movie, what happened was that, you know, so that this gentleman who was a very rich family, you know, had a
I saw
baby.
that movie which you are
Had a
quoting.
baby boy, and the baby boy wasn't breathing.
Yeah.
So this man from an ordinary family
Right.
switches the baby, and then unfortunately, you know, so as soon as they keep
Malpractices happen.
yeah, pick the baby up from one cot, you know, the baby starts to smile and laugh and whatnot. And I was like, wow, you know, so what's going to happen next? So the movie is very interesting. But having said so, you know, I just wanted to ask, you know, it was me being inquisitive early in the morning if such a thing has happened or
Thank you
not.
so much for reminding us, because I was watching a program. It was about the doctors and nurses and paramedical staff. So, and that was a hinge around how exactly that particular, so the baby was born, but that was not breathing, right? So what happened was that, and it has a medical name, I think it's called kangaroo, something like. So a doctor went inside and it asked that it took up the baby and it started caressing the baby, and it took to the chest, and the baby started breathing, and it said that this is the ancient laws of the nature, that whenever a baby is born, he needs that warmth of his mother, right? So whenever you take it to your chest, it starts breathing again. So again, and that has steeped into the medical knowledge. So does such sort of ancient, what do you call, the knowledge or the
Techniques,
ancient the tradition that has been passed from one generation to another generation, do you always recommend that to your patient, to how to inculcate the home remedies with the medical science?
बच्चे को बुखार हो रहा है, इसको ठंडे पानी की पट्टियां लगाएं, you know, something of that. So टोटके तो you're
Definitely.
famous for totkas. Does that happen?
Yeah, most of the
Wonderful.
time.
Most of the time,
And it's always healthy to, I mean, recommend the desi totkas, because they're not always on point, right?
not always,
Yes.
but sometimes that it would be helpful.
Exactly,
fever.
because my mother used to tell me, beta, you know, if your ear is hurting, I'm going to put some oil on it. You know,
Oh yeah, the oil totka,
yeah,
that's very
and then you're
notorious
going to
and
be fine.
famous.
And it totally did work, you know, and there's so
Did
many
it?
other totkas that it would
Okay.
always
in
work.
my
And-
case, it was counterproductive.
And I think it needs to be a part of our education as well, you know. So imagine that for all of those totkas which are really helpful, we really need to share it with people out there. And I think that the nurses need to know it in the first place.
Yes.
So imagine whenever we are to speak of nurses, do you think that they are specialized? For example, you know, you work with oncology, you work with peds, because the nurses within the emergency, I think, plays a very crucial role, because most of the time there's only a house doctor on a call, does not have a lot of experiences, and if the nurses over there are experienced, they can save a lot of lives. So does that really happen when you actually enter a nursing school? Do they teach you categorically, specifically, that okay, with this department, that's the technique you need to have, with this department, this is the technique you need to have? How does it work?
Actually, in our profession now, we are going to do a specialized even though there is a lot of departments and which are ICU specialization, emergency accident specialization, and ped specialization, gynae. So we have a specialized courses which we are going to be held by a department or any organization which are linked with professional nursing schools.
Okay.
So yes, definitely while you are working in some specific department, so there is a, you have a specialty.
Yep.
Then while you are going to in a hospital, the department or your senior member, even though your CON recognize your ability where you could work or where you should do work better than other place, so they placed on in that department.
Exactly, that's wonderful. And do you get to choose your departments, or is it like, you know, they will tell you which department you're going to serve?
No, it's up to us.
It's up to you.
Yeah.
So why did you pick up on peds? Do you love children a lot?
Because I love children.
All right.
Yeah.
And don't you think that it's a
don't have
little more
elders?
difficult with children and babies?
Actually, it is difficult to handle with mothers and all. Yeah.
And then you have no idea why is the baby crying. All right, what happened? Can't speak either. Yeah, please go ahead.
When you hold the baby and he or stop crying, you feel like, yeah, it's an honor. It's feel like mother.
Yeah, that's true.
Can
That's
you believe it's feel like
Okay.
mother? And when you're when you have attachment with your patient and जब हम ड्यूटी पे आते हैं तो वो बच्चा लाइक उसकी मदर कहती है कि यार ये पूरा दिन ऐसे रो रहा था बस अब आप आ गए हैं तो यू कैन हैंडल.
अम्मी आई एक तो बड़ी खुश करती हैं यार, एक तो मैंने ये भी देखा है, नर्स आती जाती है तो उसको कह देती है.
Right, right.
All right, but it's wonderful. You know, this motherly feeling obviously is an essential part of your profession too as well. And if it comes naturally, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that you really need to think twice before trusting in us too as well. It's wonderful, but thank you so much
Thank you
to
so
both
much.
of you for joining us. It was wonderful to be in conversation with you, and that too on International Nurses Day, where we celebrate. You are our heroes. We admire you
Unsung
people. We
heroes,
pray for
yes.
you. And please make sure that you continue to serve with excellence as well. And may you grow in your life. May your all dreams come
Ameen.
true. And it's for all the nurses that are out there. And nurses, I think there's only one suggestion which I'm going to give away today. And that is that please make sure that you keep on enhancing your skill every single day, because it's a skill that you're saving people as well. But ladies and gentlemen, you know, this was all about the International Nurses Day as well. As of now, we would want, because there was this Islamabad security dialogue which took place, our correspondent Mr. Raza Khan was out there. We wanted to highlight you know, how the security situation is within the city. So for the people of Islamabad, Rawalpindi, and people who are thinking to come to Islamabad and Rawalpindi, please go ahead, take a good listen.
Coalition government has carried out tough economic reforms, keeping in view the larger interest of Pakistan and at the cost of significant political capital, but these economic reforms have managed to stabilize the economy of Pakistan, which is reflected through all macroeconomic indicators. This was stated by Federal Minister for Finance Ishaq Dar during his address to the concluding session of Islamabad Security Dialogue 2023. Earlier, State Minister for Foreign Affairs Hina Rabbani Khair also addressed the second day of Islamabad Security Dialogue, in which she highlighted the need for countries like Pakistan to adopt an independent foreign policy without taking sides in the big power competition. Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General retired Nasir Khan Janjua delivered a comprehensive talk during the second day of Islamabad Security Dialogue 2023. Eminent participants from both Pakistan and abroad, representing various spheres like security and foreign policy, spoke on various topics during the various sessions of Day 2 of Islamabad Security Dialogue 2023. They shared their perspectives in a candid and in-depth manner.
Islamabad Security Dialogue is a very good initiative by National Security Division, and we are into now third of its event. Two we have already had in last 2 years. I think this is a very important forum where we discuss national and international issues, and we bring scholars from across the world, local scholars as well as international scholars, and we discuss various problems being faced by Pakistan, region and the globe.
Local and foreign diplomats, security experts, academicians, and other people attended the Day 2 of Islamabad Security Dialogue.
So Islamabad Security Dialogue is a very important event that happens every year, I think somewhere around in the March or May, and the elites of the country gather together and the policymakers gather together and they decide what the roadmap Pakistan is going to take, and obviously considering the fact that we had the guest representation from the Chinese Foreign Office was also speaking there. So it's a very important event, Shahzad, and obviously considering the fact that security is a very pertinent issue in all of the countries, right? And it has taken a lot of dimension. It can be food security, it can be climate security, it can be energy security, people security, or security in the traditional sense, the military security, right? Amassing the weapons and investing in armies, etc. So we hope and pray that in the coming days we see Pakistan progress even more, because we feel that we are in the golden capable hands.
Exactly, alhamdulillah. And I think I'm going to refer back to how New Zealand, Australia and all of these teams were coming to Pakistan, and they felt absolutely safe, and I think it feels great, to be very honest. But very quickly towards the end, since it's Friday, a lot of people are actually planning for their weekends ahead as well. Hajra, I have a very simple question for you, and that is, which one is your favorite fruit? Okay, so I'm not going to give you a lot of options, but it's totally your choice to come up. So which is your favorite fruit which you can have any time, any day, no matter what season?
I think being a Pakistani, mango trumps all of the fruits, because obviously mango is our favorite, but it's not available 24/7 or all the season. It is present in the summer season, especially in a very sweltering sort of the summer. You can feel the sweetness of the mango, and according to Ghalib, aam meethe aur bahut ho, right?
Wow. But with that, I'm going to ask you, how many different types of mangoes do you know exist?
Sindhi, Chausara,
Sindhi,
Chausa, and then the white one, what do you call that? Langda, I think. And the Seri, and other types, I don't know. But yes, I can, with the smell of that, I can understand that this is the good one to take.
Wow, that's wonderful. So I think next time, whenever we're going mango picking, we'll actually take you as well. And that's exactly what my producer said as well. But with that, I was so shocked and surprised, because alhamdulillah, so what we do is that my parents, they make sure that there's always fruit in the house, so these days very different types of fruit and fruit names are coming up, so imagine, so I was having watermelon with my father sitting down, and then there was this yellow watermelon type of a thing as well. I was like, Maji, what is this? Is it a kharbuza or is it a tarboos? That's how we refer to it in Urdu. And she said, it's a sharbuza. And I was like, what's a sharbuza? And she's like, it's a neoform, and then there's sarda as well. And there's garma as well, so it's just mind-boggling and confusing at times, but ladies and gentlemen, at the same time, it's really tasty. Make sure that you keep up on your micronutrients and all the fruits as well.
And I think being a Pakistani, we take this thing for granted, because we have a lot of fresh fruits in the season, right? And this is the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because if you go abroad, and especially Shahzad has this opportunity, they're so bland, and I think they're very genetically modified, right? So you don't get to same taste or same sweetness, because they've injected a lot of chemicals into their growth or stems or whatever the scientific process is, right?
But I think strawberry with cream tops it all.
Yes, and you can find strawberry 24/7 all of the season. What sort of the strawberry is this?
So you can find all sorts of fruit all across the year. I think that's what it is. But ladies and gentlemen, we're short on time. I mean, if we keep on talking about eating, I think we might have to eat right after this program as well. But thank you so much for staying tuned. Thank you so much, Hajar, for being with us. Lovely to be in conversation. To our guests as well, thank you so much. Once again, for everybody who's out there, since today happens to be Friday, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you remember us, our entire team, our entire staff in your prayers as well. Make sure that you make dua for the entire Muslim Ummah out there as well. So whenever you're asking for a ghadi or a ghar or a car or a bangalow, please make sure that you ask for it for everybody. Allah might listen to your dua for me, and I might live in a bigger house, inshallah, one day. She's already living in one. May Allah give you another bigger house as well. So everybody out there, ladies and gentlemen, because whenever you are asking from Allah Almighty, ladies and gentlemen, He's qadir on everything. Ask for whatever you want and for whoever you want. Until next time, look after yourselves. 1, 2, 3.
Good morning.
Happy Friday.